So I'm not actually sure what I'm gonna title this video. You know, I wanted to title it something like players with the most pressure, but that's not really exactly what the video is about. The video is more about players that are kind of on their last stand to be not for their careers, but the perception of that player might change if things don't change after this year. And I don't really mean the outside perspective, I more so mean the perspective of their respective teams. Someone that I feel like doesn't fit this video but fits more of the usual most pressure on them is someone like Donovan Mitchell, where I feel like if the Cavs don't make a deep playoff run this year, people are going to start looking at him a little bit differently. No one ever really talks about Donovan Mitchell like that because he hasn't had those expectations. Now he does have them, so that's the type of player you would see on the traditional most pressure list. That's not what I'm trying to do here today. We might as well get to it. But before we get to it, I gotta say thank you guys. We just hit 10,000 subscribers. It is kind of crazy. It is kind of surreal. I usually don't care about numbers like that. I mean, I bring it up because it's another milestone to keep you motivated, but hitting 10K is kind of special. It's kind of special. I know it doesn't mean much. I see channels with millions of subs that don't get as many views as I get, and it's not like I get a ton of views, right? So I appreciate every single one of you that have even watched the video, that have subscribed and unsubscribed, right? If you've given me any second of your time, I appreciate that. Again, thank you. Back to the video. And to start off with, a great player to showcase what I really mean here, and this one's a little bit complicated, but it's Shaedon Sharpe. And I say it's a little bit complicated because now them getting Dame back, that also adds a bit of pressure on Scoot Henderson as well. So kind of both of those guys. But let's focus on Shaedon Sharpe because he's going to be a free agent at the end of this year. Now, luckily for him, unlike this summer, a lot of teams are going to have cap space, so he's probably going to get a pretty decent deal from somebody, right? And then Portland will decide if they want to match that. So the money is not really the pressure here, although there is pressure on him playing well and getting a nice deal. I just think someone's going to give him that deal. But the idea of Shaedon Sharpe being someone you build around, I feel like today or this year is like going to be the last opportunity he has to really showcase that he's one of those guys. And whenever I talk about Shaedon Sharpe, I make sure to make it clear that I was never a believer in him, so maybe that clouds my vision a little bit, but I think I'm being pretty fair to say that he hasn't been bad, right? But it hasn't looked like he's gonna be this star level player on either end of the court, really. And if you watch his highlight reels, it looks absolutely crazy, but the shooting hasn't been there, the playmaking hasn't been there. He doesn't really get to the line. He's only gonna be 22 next year. I'm not trying to write him off at all. And I actually think the reason it's more important, or the reason I'm focusing on him, is because he's actually in a very good situation. When you look at their team, they have defensive wings in Denny and Tumani Kamara. They brought in Drew Holiday, another, great defender, hopefully still a great defender at this age. They got Donovan Clingan. They got Hansen, right? They got Robert Williams is still on this team. Jeremy Grant's still on this team. There's a lot of talent on this team, and they're missing that dynamic scorer that he's supposed to be. And I'm sure I've said this in previous videos, but the obvious comp is Jalen Green, right? Where now everyone thinks Jalen Green is terrible because he got paid. Are we gonna think that as soon as Shaedon Sharpe gets paid? Is he gonna be underwhelming as soon as he gets paid? Because they are similar players, but I think Jalen Green is more dynamic off the dribble than Shaedon Sharpe has shown. And to be fair to Shaedon Sharpe, he showcased some mid-range abilities, right? Not consistently, but this year he shot 47% from 10 to 16 feet. That's elite. That's not like Kevin Durant elite, but that's like, actually, I shouldn't say elite, right? You look at players like Devin Booker, Brandon Ingram, they're shooting over 50% from that area on the court, but 47% is a pretty decent number from there. But before that, he shot 37% and 31%. So I don't trust that midi is a consistent part of his game yet. He's just not an efficient scorer in any way, really. And I know everyone is so down on Jalen Green right now, but if Shaedon Sharpe has the year that Jalen Green had last year offensively, this team should be a playoff team. They're that good around him. Last year was a career high in three-point rate. Is that a correlation with him shooting a career low from three? Is he a player that does more with less? Is he a player that you feel better with other great players around him? Or is he a player that can go get his own in a real way, which is what they're going to need him to do this year, and I'm skeptical of that. Again, can he be what Jalen Green was last year in terms of shot creation, in terms of a little bit of playmaking, right? Not saying he has to be a Devin Booker or DeMar DeRozan level of a playmaker from the two-guard position, but can he get up to 3 assists a game? Can he get up to 4 assists a game? That would be huge for this team if he could be that type of dynamic playmaker on the ball. We shall see. I'm not a big believer, but I really do like this team. And if he does hit that ceiling, this team could be very, very dangerous. Speaking of lack of playmaking, Cam Thomas, who is currently not signed right now, was having a war of words. Well, not really a war of words, but he was responding to something Zach Lowe said on Twitter, where Zach Lowe was saying the sentiment around Cam Thomas is he's an empty calories type of player. I don't really believe in that, but I do believe in Cam Thomas is not going to be one of your best players. I do believe his skill set translate. I could see it translating to a winning situation. I could see him in the type of role of an elite scorer off the bench or even a starter, right? I could see him maybe not exact. I was going to say like the Jordan Poole role on the Warriors, but Jordan Poole is more of a playmaker than that. It is tough to see the ideal scenario for Cam Thomas, but I do believe the skill set is real. I do believe the shot making is real. And his skill set is much more proven at the NBA level than a Shaedon Sharpe. We know exactly what Cam Thomas can do. The question is, can he do more? And this is probably going to be his last chance to actually showcase that he can be a lead guard on not a winning team, right? Because most guards cannot lead this team to wins, but can he showcase the potential of him being that player? Someone that you can actually run your offense through with him on the ball. And when he was going on that little Twitter rant defending himself, I don't blame him for defending himself. He's a free agent right now. He's trying to get paid. These are the conversations people are having around his name. I understand why he's defending himself. But something he brought up was like, look at how much times I'm doubled. And there was a stat going, or I don't know, there was a graphic going around. I can't remember who posted it. Apologies, but it was showing like Zion, Cam Thomas, Kawhi Leonard. There was someone else, but Kawhi Leonard really stood out to me because I remember watching the series against the Nuggets and Kawhi was getting doubled. And it wasn't because Kawhi was killing him, although Kawhi was killing him, especially that game too, one of the craziest games I've ever seen. But they weren't doubling Kawhi because, oh, we can't stop Kawhi. They were doubling Kawhi, in my opinion, because they said, you know what, we're going to live with Kawhi as a playmaker. We're going to live with the idea that he's not going to make the right read enough times to really kill us. And that's why we've seen Kawhi have a career-high 11 assists in Game 5 of that series, and the Clippers got blew out. The Nuggets were right. I'm not saying that particular game, but overall, their process was right. Kawhi is not going to beat us as a passer. Same thing with Cam Thomas. Now, Kawhi happens to be one of the most efficient scorers of all time, and even if you look at that playoff series, if you look at Kawhi's numbers, they look crazy. But if you were watching that series, besides Game 2, again, one of the greatest playoff performances I've ever seen in terms of shot making, Kawhi was not as good as those stats indicate in that playoff series, and they still went 7. But back to Cam Thomas. I think people double Cam Thomas not because he's killing them, although he does kill them. He is a handful one-on-one. I get that. That is very true. But they're not doubling you because, oh, what are we going to do? Cam Thomas is getting buckets. They're doubling you because they know we're going to live with that result. You're not going to make the right play enough to warrant not doubling you. And you'll probably hear me say that again very soon because I want to make a video on the whole double teaming idea, why teams do it, why teams don't do it. I think it's a good conversation to have because you hear so many fans just say, oh, look at they're doubling them, and they don't understand everything else that's going on the court. Not that I get everything right, but I feel like I could make a good video about that, so expect that soon. But Cam Thomas in general, you look at how many guards they picked up in the draft. How could there not be a ton of pressure on him to prove himself worthy of whatever, right? We don't know what the contract is going to be. It's probably going to be a very tradable contract, and I feel like that's what's going to happen. He's going to end up being traded to a team that needs him to just score, while the Nets try to figure out if they get their point guard in the future in Jaeger Demon or any other guards they drafted, right? So a lot of pressure on Cam Thomas. I think this is his last chance to showcase he can be a lead guard in the NBA and not just a scorer. And now I want to talk about an all-star level player, one of my favorite players in the NBA, a player that I always go to bat for, but it is kind of time, and I'm talking about LaMelo Ball. I've made several videos on my channel about LaMelo Ball, a lot of them with the conclusion that I think LaMelo Ball is more of a off-ball player. I said this about Lonzo very early in his career, back when I was a Laker fan, and people killed me for saying that, and I don't want to people didn't kill me for saying that, but you know how the Lonzo stands were. The idea of saying he wasn't a point guard was so offensive to them. And it's not really, you guys can define positions the way you want to define them, but my whole thing was Lonzo was not a player that was going to break down your defense. He was not a player that was going to collapse the paint. He was not a player that was going to take a pull-up midi. And in today's NBA, you kind of need to be able to do that to be a point guard. Lonzo really started to flourish off ball as a playmaking wing that could defend. Now, LaMelo is a much better on-ball scorer than Lonzo. He's a lot more creative off the dribble. He has a little floater game, right? So he has that in his bag that Lonzo never really had. But I think a lot of it still applies. I think the best version of LaMelo is playing off of another player that attracts a lot more attention than anyone he's ever played with. I think the best version of LaMelo is playing off of someone else. And that's not really relevant to this video. I mean, it kind of is, but not really. It's relevant because the Hornets don't have that type of player. They don't have another playmaker on their team. Maybe Brandon Miller has a playmaking leap that I don't see coming at all, but it's still a bunch of players that are built around, or that are built for the need of LaMelo to be on ball creating for them. They don't have anyone that's going to create shots for LaMelo, which I think is a problem. But overall, LaMelo can't stay healthy. They don't win anything. And they are so reliant on him trying to build an identity around a player that is never healthy. And if they're not winning, it might come to a point where he'd be much more valuable to another team, right? If it gets to the point where you feel like, okay, he's not going to be the guy we build our whole thing around, he's probably more valuable to a team that already has that in place, and he can go play off of them. If he's only giving us 50 games, which he's only done twice in his career, by the way, but if he's only giving us 50 games, we're only winning 30 games, what sense does it really make to be building around this guy instead of trading him, getting assets in return, and starting an actual rebuild? Not an actual, because they're in the midst of a rebuild, but it just might make a lot more sense to trade him, get some veterans in the house that fit with the young guys, that can help develop the young guys, and also get assets in return, get picks in return, whatever it might be. I could see it getting to that point. If we have another year of LaMelo not playing and the Hornets not winning, again, it gets to a point where it's like, what are we doing here? And if you're, I just said all of this, but follow me here. If you're a team that's trying to contend and you feel like you're one player away, LaMelo might be that type of player. For example, what Orlando just did with Desmond Bane. If the Hornets were offered that for LaMelo at this point, I think they kind of got to think about it. If they're getting 4 first-round picks for LaMelo, I don't think that would happen right now due to his injury history, but something like that, where a team like Orlando, you got your Franz, you got Paolo, we need LaMelo to be off ball, playing off of those guys. He's going to have the ball for sure, but he has other creators that can get him open as well. It makes a lot more sense than building everything around LaMelo. And I also believe the Hornets are in a place where someone like KCP would be valuable to them, not because he's going to change everything, but because he would be, in theory, he would be a vet to bring in. He would be someone helping push the development forward while also getting the picks. But I think that type of deal, a couple veterans and a bunch of picks, might be what Charlotte actually needs at this point. Veterans that can help win games and assets toward the future. And I have to remind you guys that LaMelo is still one of my favorite players in the NBA. I highly recommend you go watch any of my LaMelo videos. I'm higher on him than almost anybody covering basketball. It's not a situation where I'm not believing in LaMelo. I'm just thinking about it from the perspective of the Hornets GM. You kind of got to start thinking about this if this dude is never going to be healthy. But for example, hypothetical trade, Davion Mitchell, Andrew Wiggins for LaMelo. Now picks involved in that, but that doesn't sound like much, but I feel like that's the type of deal a Charlotte would really want. Not taking a flyer on another young player, because you got your young players. You want veterans in here that could help build a winning culture while also getting picks. I could see something like that happening. And I know it's hypothetical, but I should let you guys know that that deal would not be able to happen till January 15th because Davion Mitchell just signed that extension. But something like that I could really see happening. And the last one is something that I thought about while I was making my last video titled, "What Are They Doing?" And it really came to me while I was making the video. And if you guys want to go watch that video, I talk about it a little bit there. But the idea of Scottie Barnes, right? Scottie Barnes is a fascinating player. I think most people don't think Scottie Barnes is ever going to be like your 1A player on a great team. But as I was talking about what the plan is for the Raptors and all the contracts they've given out to Brandon Ingram, Emmanuel Quickley, Jakob Poeltl, right? They overpaid slightly for all of those guys, right? When you look at the market in general. And if you look at this team, if they were to make a big move, right? We're thinking, oh, what are they? They're going to trade RJ and Emmanuel Quickley, and they're going to get. No, if they're going to make the big move, it's actually Scottie Barnes. That's the trade chip. That's the big move. If everybody is healthy this year, if BI's healthy, if Quickley's healthy, if Scottie's healthy, which is probably not going to be the case, right? But if everybody is relatively healthy and they are a disappointment, I don't think the move's going to be let's pivot and trade BI and get nothing really great in return. I think the move would be, let's try to go get someone better than Scottie to be our number one. And that's in a hypothetical where the Raptors aren't really good at all. Scottie Barnes doesn't have any progression this year. The three ball continues to go down. It doesn't look like him and BI are a fit, right? I'm not saying they want to trade Scottie, but that is the obvious pivot point that they kind of set themselves up perfectly for, because they have a good team around Scottie. The only question is Scottie that guy? And probably not, right? I hope he is, but probably not. And who would they possibly get for Scottie that's better than Scottie? The first name that comes to mind is Devin Booker. Like, if Phoenix is just terrible this year, the idea of having Scottie Barnes with Ryan Dunn, Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, like that fits pretty well. And that would be a good situation for Scottie to go thrive. I'm just hypothetically, right? That's the first name that came to mind. Other one was Jaylen Brown. I thought about John Morant. I'm just throwing out hypothetical names. I'm not saying anyone is likely to happen, although of those, I think Devin Booker would be the most likely to happen, because there's a chance that Phoenix is just god awful and they don't have their pick this year and they just might be done with the whole experience. I know they extended Devin Booker, but as we see in the NBA, that does not mean much. So again, I'm not predicting that Scottie Barnes will be traded, in part because I actually like this roster. I like Scottie Barnes. I like Brandon Ingram. Quickly and Barrett, I'm iffy on. I like Jakob Poeltl. Toronto's always good at finding those diamonds in the rough, whether it's the G League or undrafted guys, right? So I'm pretty confident they're going to be a competent team. But in the event that they are just bad, the easiest way for them to get better would probably be trading Scottie Barnes. As crazy as that sounds to say, I think that would be the easiest move. That would be the most logical move, right? Because the only way they're going to be bad, and when I say bad, I mean like not even in the play-in type of bad. The only way they're going to be that bad is if Scottie Barnes is not that guy, or BI gets hurt again, which is a real possibility. But in the event that guys are relatively healthy and they are just terrible, I think it's going to change the way you have to look at Scottie Barnes and maybe say, okay, he's not the guy we build around. And obviously that's not the only option. You could trade quickly, you could trade RJ, you could trade Jakob Poeltl, you could even trade BI, but I'm just not sure what that actually gets you. But again, hypothetically speaking, let me play 2K GM for a second. If you were to trade Scottie Barnes for Devin Booker, probably not straight up, right? But if you were able to do that and still have quickly, still have RJ, well, now you could trade RJ and try to get a 3-and-D wing to put next to BI and Devin Booker. Like, just thinking out loud here, right? Don't take me too seriously, but it's a big year for Scottie Barnes to show he is a franchise level guy. Looking at what Cade has become, looking at what Evan Mobley has become, even looking at what Franz Wagner has become, Scottie Barnes has been a distant fourth in that race now. And not that that's relevant to anything really, but it's time for him to show he's a franchise level player. If not, these conversations will heat up, right? I'm not predicting it. I'm just saying it's a real possibility if the Raptors disappoint, and more specifically, if he disappoints. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Again, thank you guys so much for hitting 10,000 subscribers. Please continue, like, comment, subscribe. It will mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm out. Peace.